Welcome back to my series of tutorial slash information-based videos about how I create comics and the processes that I'm going through. I hope this series has been fun and most importantly has helped you in making comics, or at least educated you a little bit in the work that goes into it. We've already covered making art and getting the story ready, and the last thing on this list is essentially lettering. So lettering can be put into two different categories. You've got dialogue boxes and you've got sound effects for the most part. So we'll start with the dialogue boxes. So the most important part about the dialogue boxes and the comic is font selection. And this is something I can't really tell you what to do. There are a lot of popular comic book fonts out there that are very similar to each other and will get the job done just fine. But what you want to look out for is letter spacing, how well they look in italics, bolds, full caps, etc. Most comic book dialogue should always be capital letters. You should never have like upper and lowercase. It just doesn't read well in a comic book setting. There's a few other things that you should also be aware of, sort of rookie mistakes. When you're putting a balloon in a panel, never, if it's going near the border, never cut the balloon at its widest point. Always sort of cut it where the circular balloon, where it's tapering off. It just looks neater. The other thing as well is the tail end of the dialogue box should look as if it's coming from the center of the balloon, not the top or the bottom. That's also very important. And they should always point in the direction of the mouth of the character, but you need to leave a good amount of space between the character and not, so it doesn't distract from that beautiful character art and sort of ruin the story. So don't ever cover like a character's face or an important detail with a dialogue box. And never cross the tails either. I'm not sure if I said that already. If you have multiple people talking, always make sure each speech bubble neatly points to that character without impeding any of the other speech bubbles. And that's really all the advice I can give you, other than trying them out. Now, there are many different types of speech bubbles. I'll put some examples on the screen. I didn't make this. I found it in image search. But it's important to understand what they're used for. So you want your sort of regular speech bubbles to be nice and circular. They can overlap. You can make them a little bold, line thickness depending on the look of the book, etc. They can also be square at times too. Then you've got sort of creature bubbles. So if it's like a robot or a monster or a ghost or something, you want to sort of put some character in those bubbles, like, ooh, make them fun in that regard as well. Like I said, good lettering should never be noticed, but bad lettering ruins a comic. You've got things like date boxes. These are nice and square and neat, fit in with the characterization of the comic as well. So you can play with the style there. Be careful with your lettering. Inner dialogue boxes as well. That's something to look at. So is someone whispering, thinking, talking over a radio? Are they shocked? Are they surprised? All of these things you need to sort of take into account and sort of play around with the designs of. But I can't really tell you what to do here. I'm not an artistic person. I've spent a lot of time reading tutorials, and I'm just sort of learning this as I go at the moment. But that's dialogue boxes. So as I said, good lettering goes a long way, and nobody will ever point out good lettering. But they will notice bad lettering, and it will be the thing that makes the comic get put down. So be very careful with your lettering choices. Okay, now we get into the fun stuff, sound effects. We all know what these are. If you remember the old 60s Batman, the bam, pow, biff. Like, those things are what we're talking about here. And when done well, sound effects are incredible, and sometimes you don't even notice they're on the page, but you read them because they just blend really, really well. But it's important. There's a few things, and a lot of this is personal taste, and you'll have to experiment with the page. You won't get it right the first time. But there's a few things that I think make sound effects good. You have to make it feel natural and make it follow the eye line of the page without distracting from the art. It needs to sound accurate. You don't want a situation where you're looking at a page and you're going, wait, what? Did they really just put that there? And it needs to be readable. I recently read the Monster Islands comic book series, and the lettering was fine, but the sound effect lettering actually like made the comic feel really cheap and made it hard to read in some pages, as you can see on the screen. And because of that, like, it sort of left a sour taste in my mouth about the entire book, because the book was fairly average, but average is fine. Average isn't bad. It's just normal. But then when the lettering sort of let me down, it sort of dragged that book below average. And it's one of those things, like I keep saying, good lettering, you don't even notice it. Like, you appreciate it without realizing you appreciate it until you run into bad lettering. And then you're like, oh gosh, what are they doing? And you spend like 2 minutes on a page trying to figure it out. This is, once again, this is something where there are so many different creative and interesting ways to do it that you should really experiment with these. And a good letterer will sort of have their own method, and you can kind of tell a good letterer when you're reading a comic. You go, oh yeah, the lettering on this is great. Like, it's when you like pay attention to these things, as you sort to read more and more or write more and more, good lettering is so good. So make sure your sound effects don't distract. They fit on the page nicely, and they sound good, but yeah, just don't sort of distract and stand out too much from the art and the actual, context of the page. And if you do that, you'll be fine. Sometimes it's best just not to do it if you're unsure. It's not always necessary, and don't overdo it on a page either. But that concludes this lesson. And look, I know we discussed lettering a little bit in the last issue, but I felt there was more to say because it is a very big thing. And I may not have realized that last time, but now that I'm lettering 2 of my comic books, boy, is it difficult. So as always, let me know what you think. Have you done lettering before? And what are some tips for good lettering that you find helps a lot? Let me know in the comments, and always don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this, and check out some of my other videos. Thanks again.